Hi, everyone. Welcome to another live chat today. We have a lot of people. I'm Shovik. I'm here with Charles. I see the comment section's pretty much very crowded, so I'm going to have a hard time looking at the comments. So, yeah, welcome to a score reveal, which is very interesting. Not a lot of reveal things on YouTube involve GMAT scores. I think that's the first. I'm here with Charles. I'm Shovik. I'm a second-year student at the Michigan Ross School of Business. Fun fact, I just finished my graduation commencement. And thank you, Charles. And we got to see Tom Brady and Stephen Ross. I think most of you know Tom Brady, not nearly as much as Stephen Ross. But it was fun. It was on Zoom. It was a lot of people congratulating us while we are in our pajamas, I guess. So it was not bad. So anyway, so back to GMAT things. As most of you know, I took the GMAT almost a week and a half back now. I took it on the second day. I took it very late at night, and we did a video. Go back if you haven't watched that yet. And yeah, so I want to talk about how I scored. GMAT sort of sent the score in sort of exactly 7 days. So that was pretty meticulous of them. I'm here with Charles. Charles is the verbal expert on GMAT Club. He also has his own GMAT prep company. He's also known as GMAT Ninja by his close friends and his wife. But Charles, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
That's probably most of it. So GMAT Club's resident verbal expert for going on 4 years now. I've been tutoring for about 20 years. My wife does not call me GMAT Ninja at home. But I want today to be mostly about Shovik. I'm not sure which way I'm pointing. But Shovik, before you jump in, can you tell everybody a little bit about your previous GMAT experience? Because you had a heck of a long tail. Give us the quick rundown of
your
studies so we can compare that against what happened on the online GMAT.
Right. So I took a GMAT a bunch of times before. I got a 720 the first time I took it, and it was not great because I was scoring higher on my practice tests, which sort of tells you that the real deal can be a lot different. There's a lot of stress and all of that stuff coming in. So my first GMAT, I took it, I think, back in 2015. I was fairly fresh out of college, and I just didn't know what to do. I thought that I'd just get the GMAT out of the way. And I was disappointed with my score because I was around GMAT Club enough to know that 720 is just not going to cut it for me, right? Because I'm Indian, I'm a dude, I'm also an engineer, so like strike three. So I knew sort of I needed a better score to get into business school. So I sort of, like hung around the forums and did a bunch of different things to do better. I took a bunch of courses, but I think what sort of helped me was to figure out what I'm more comfortable with, figure out a few new strategies. So my second attempt was in 2017, and I got a 760 on that attempt. So I was pretty happy with that score. And I sort of knew that 760 is going to get me to business school for sure, right? And so I didn't have to worry about retaking it. So I was pretty happy. I posted a really long debrief. That's on GMAT Club too. If you Google like 4 years to 760 or some random thing that I titled my post as, you should get a lot of my agony. Then I took the GMAT again, actually. I took the GMAT again when the GMAT became shorter. After I took the test, like a few months after, the GMAT became shorter, and I just wanted to try it out. Like I wanted to see, does it have any impact? And in my head, I was like, no, it's a standardized test. It's not going to have much impact. But I was also like, does being shorter give me a chance to score even higher? So I did take the test again, and this time I scored a 750. So my verbal score actually dropped by a point. I was like, okay, this is well within the standard deviations. So that's it. That was the last time I did the GMAT in person back in 2017. And then I came to business school, sort of like detached myself from the GMAT world. And then the GMAT Online thing happened, and I was sheltering in place in Florida. And I was talking to BB, who runs the forum. And I was like, hey, what do you think of me taking the test? And he was like, yeah, take the test. I want somebody I know to take the test so that I can build the whiteboard. They're like, yeah, cool. So it seems like a benevolent task, but a lot of people were saying, oh, you're doing this brave thing. I really wasn't. I just wanted to have fun. And so I did. I got an appointment on the second day and I took the test. And that's pretty much it.
So I know you spent a lot of time on another YouTube broadcast talking about kind of the experience you had and what went well, what went badly. And we'll field any questions you guys have about it who are watching live. We'll field those questions in a minute. What did you think you got? So when you walked out, so you had to wait a week to get your score. When you walked out of the online exam, what do you think you were going to get?
That's a good question. I actually I speculated about this, and I thought I was going to get anywhere between like a 650 to a 720. That was my guess, sort of. The reason is that my last test, my last good test, like the one that I scored a 760, I was a little bit disappointed because I didn't get a Q51, and I sort of, and I was playing with this. It's the Indian quant vanity, Charles. So and I was replaying it, like and I saw my ESR, and I realized that I had made 2 mistakes in quant, and that's it. By the way, for people who are watching, ESR used to be this thing where you could get an analysis of your test. You cannot get that on GMAT Online, unfortunately. But you can reasonably guess how many questions you got wrong from the ESR, which is a pretty cool thing. So, and I realized that getting from Q49 to a Q50, Q49 was my earlier quant score. Getting from a Q49 to a Q50 is actually really challenging. You can get a Q49 with like 10 questions wrong or 8 questions wrong. It's hard to get a Q50 with 8 questions wrong, in my opinion. But I realized that Q50 and Q51 are sort of interchangeable. So, and I'm not just saying this to like stroke my ego, but I've seen people getting a Q51 with 3 questions wrong, with two questions wrong. So I was a bit bummed. However, in those attempts, I never had to skip a quant question. I mean, I sure made mistakes, but I always had like extra time in quant where I didn't have to, okay, I can't do this question. Let me just guess and move on. That never happened. This happened on the online GMAT twice. So I guessed and moved on twice, not because I couldn't solve the question, but more because I just didn't want to put myself through multiplying or subtracting really large numbers. And I had time, by the way. If time wasn't the issue, I just didn't care. I was like, okay, screw it. I just don't want to do this. I love the test, but you're not going to, make me subtract 4-digit numbers with decimals, right? And I remember there was this another question. You know how those like alphabetized numeric questions, like, oh, like ABCD is a number, and when you add ABCD to like BCAD, you get this. I was like, there is no way I can do that without a pen and paper, and I'm not gonna draw ABCD like an idiot. So like, okay, screw it. So I skipped that question too. So I skipped two questions. So I actually thought my quant would be 49 at best and probably a 48. But it wasn't. I scored a Q50. Spoiler alert, I scored a Q50 even in this test. So it was strange, I guess.
Okay, so what we have is a 760 back in 2017, 750 when you decided to retake it when they shortened the test. You expected somewhere between a 650 to a 720. You thought you were going to score as badly as BB on the quant. He's watching.
I'm sure.
Quant came out better than you expected. Okay, so 650 to 720 is what you're thinking walking out the door. Are you ready to tell everybody what your score was?
Yes, it's no suspense. I scored a 740, and if you follow me on the forums, you already know this. So it's not a big reveal like Captain America dies in Avengers 2.
Why did it take us 9 minutes then?
No, but I think the reason why I wanted to build a little bit of the suspense is because the score is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Like I think people are freaking out about people like instructors are getting 730 or 740, and like some people accused me of like, oh, your score doesn't matter. You're a GMAT enthusiast. I was like, dude, I mean, it's true. I spent more time on the GMAT than the regular person, but I've also not prepped. Like I didn't prep for like 2 years, and I was in business school. So I walked in with zero whiteboard practice and zero prep, and I think my biggest surprise in this test was that it was absolutely manageable. And I'm sort of contradicting what I said in the past video. When I hadn't taken the test, it actually didn't feel all that bad. So yeah. So I scored a 740. My quant score was 50. My verbal score was 41. And my IR score, believe it or not, was 8. And so I think I did very well on the IR. So it was strange because I've sort of had, I know my camera is doing this autofocus weirdness, but that's okay. So I sort of went in with this thing that, you know what, screw IR, who cares? Like, I'm just going to guess all the questions and move on. But then when I took the break and I came back up, I was taking the test upstairs, and I came back up, we sort of like, okay, this is an opportunity to see how bad I am at IR, so let's just take it. The only place where I felt that, okay, this is not worth it was an MSR question. So I sort of knew that when MSR question arrives on my screen, I'm just going to move on. By the way, for people who don't know, MSR is like this type of an IR question where you have like data from multiple sources. Like you'll have a paragraph or you have a data table all together, and you have questions based on those sources. So, but my MSR question, Charles, it was so easy. It was ridiculous. So it was like one question purely out of the data table and one question purely out of the text. Like, okay, this is a slam dunk. So I think I skipped one, and I think I did the other ones right. So I got a full score on IR. So that was good.
Awesome. Congratulations. Not that it matters for you.
Well, finally I can apply to Michigan Ross. Oh wait, I already graduated from Michigan Ross. So, yeah, no, I think I'm happy I did it. By the way, for people who have watched the last video, I just want to lay out like, Andrea, who was the guy from Italy, he scored a 750. Holy shit! And then Moose Patrick, he scored a 730, which was perfectly in line with his other score. So that was great. And Haley from Veritas Prep, she scored a 730. And by the way, like, she is super kind. So she wrote a lot about her experiences. So feel free to go to the GMAT Online thread on GMAT Club to get those updates.
So I think what you're saying, Shivik, correct me if this is wrong, is that the drop-offs on the online GMAT really haven't been as bad as I think we all feared. I think there was another tutor, a guy named Brian Prestia, who posted a 790, I think, on the forum.
Right.
Do you think that's fair, that depending on how much the whiteboard is making you uncomfortable, it might not affect you on more than a handful of questions? Fair?
I think it depends, I think it's a question of what's your prep strategy. I do think one of the reason, like if I were a GMAT instructor, I think, and I was instructing in a way where I leverage the Scratchpad as much as I can, I could see my score dropping even more. So just to give you guys a little bit of background, this is how I prepped for the GMAT in my last in-person attempts. So one of my biggest issues, and I think this is true for most Indians who grew up in like a very quantity background, we do a lot of math in our heads. It's sort of used to do a lot of math in our heads. And in the GMAT, it was a handicap. It was a bad thing that I was doing math in my head. And it was, first of all, it was lazy. So I was organizing a lot of my math in my head because I didn't want to actually put it on paper and do the work. And the second thing was also, when you're doing stuff in your head, you are way more inclined to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. So even if you think you're like Ramanujan, by the way, Ramanujan is like a really tragic mathematician, like one of the greatest. Even if you're Ramanujan, like apparently he could say maybe the first 1,000 digits of the expansion of E, but whatever. So unless you're like incredibly gifted in memory, you should not do things on your head. So, and so I had to like actively deprogram myself. And for every single data sufficiency question, I would make a grid. In fact, I did a previous video on the GMAT Club channel where I advised people to use a grid for data sufficiency. And I think if you have really trained to use those strategies, I think this test will not go as well as you think for you. Because now being able to do decent math in your head actually works massively in your favor. Sorry, go ahead.
I think I might push back on that a little bit. And we're actually getting a ton of questions now about, do you need mental math?
Sure.
Is it going to help you? So let's talk about that a little bit. I think what you're suggesting, Shovik, is that in general, even if you're amazing fundamentally at math, the best way to train for the normal GMAT, because it penalizes you so heavily if you make careless errors. If you miss easy questions, it doesn't matter if you're incredible. It's going to send your score down the toilet if you make dumb errors. So you need to be really disciplined about writing things down. If you keep it, you're going to make mistakes, right? So that's the way we train our students in normal times. So I think in the world where you have the whiteboard and it's clunky, I think you have two broad choices. So there's a separate thing where it's practice with the whiteboard. Let's talk about that more in a minute. But you can either do more mental math, or I think in a weird way, and what we're having our students do right now, and what we're seeing people be somewhat successful with, is that instead of doing more mental math, I think it's actually for some students, they're doing a little bit better because it's slowing them down. They have to think about their steps because it's so clunky to punch anything in. So it's so messy. If you're going to write down a line of algebra, you better make it count. If you're going to go draw a square on that whiteboard, you better make it count. So one path is to say, well, I'm going to transfer all this training I did where I'm trying to be really systematic on paper or on the scratch pad. And I'm going to try to transfer that into my head, and I'm going to do all this mental math. That's one path you could take. The other path, I think, or maybe a hybrid of the two, is to say, well, okay, I'm still going to really carefully write as much down as I need to, as much down as I can. But I'm going to do everything humanly possible to reduce the number of steps so that what I'm writing down is extremely strategic. And we're seeing people succeed with the latter. The people who can succeed with the former probably don't need our help. Those aren't people who ever tutoring.
No, totally. I totally agree. So here's the thing. When I was taking the test, I was sort of very prepared to do a lot of mental math. I don't like the whiteboard. I hate writing. I hate drawing. I'm very bad at it. And also, I didn't have a mouse. Like now I bought a new mouse for my workspace, but I did not have a mouse. So trying to draw legible things with your trackpad was also a nightmare, right?
Shovik, were you using the text box at all, or were you just drawing?
I was using them a lot. I'll get to that. Yeah, I mean, that was my saving grace. But I think you're totally right. I think if you can translate some of the stuff that you were used to do on the scratch pad on the whiteboard without, sure, there'll be drops in efficiency, but if you can still maintain with some efficiency, I think it's great. And it's also again, I'm just going to reiterate what like doing math mentally versus doing it on paper means. It's not like, let's say I have to multiply, 55 with like 7, right? Like I can do that in my head. And I would, even on the regular GMAT, I would still very likely do it in my head. What I mean by putting your thoughts on paper is like when you put stuff to paper, you're less forgetful. Like, for example, and the GMAT is brutal. Like it's so punishing on things like this because you'll have a random question where you will forget that X is an integer. Or you'll have a random question where you would forget that X is positive. And I got so many mistakes on like number theory questions and inequalities questions because I didn't write out those preconditions that I was just losing out on those questions. Because like X is positive and I would assume that X equals 0 for my testing case, which is wrong. So I would say still writing those down, especially if you're like me and you can't remember preconditions, is going to be very helpful. And coming to the text box, I use them a lot. I use the text box exclusively. I did not write anything down with the pointer, which I think the pointer doesn't work. I mean, for people it does, who are very used to it, great, but I would much rather use the text box. So I did all my inequality equation questions all through writing, like typing stuff down.
Outstanding. So what else? So you had only a very small drop. We actually have somebody who's in the comments right now, the live comments, who got a 780. So I'm not sure how to pronounce she, S-C-H-I. Congratulations on that 780.
Oh, wow.
That's amazing. And I think I recognize that handle from the forum. So that's awesome. Congratulations.
That's very cool.
So bottom line, one of the other big sets of questions we're getting from the live crowd is, well, wait a minute. We're talking here about all these people who are already scoring really high. This is the top 10% or whatever who are scoring in the 700s. And I don't think we're seeing as massive of a drop off as we might have expected. And it's going to depend a little bit on the person.
Right.
And one of the questions is, do you think that the drop off for the online GMAT is worse for somebody that is, let's say, at the 650 level or 550 level than for folks who are already in the 700s? My take on that is that I don't know that it necessarily matters much. I think the drop off probably comes from, what is your fundamental relationship with writing things down? Right. Does your hand need to be moving in order to read? If you can't understand a reading comprehension passage without actively taking notes, so in other words, if you're a really kinesthetic learner, I think it's really hard to transfer that over to the whiteboard, for example.
Yeah.
If you really struggle to be strategic about how you use the whiteboard, so kind of what you were just talking about, Shovik, which is, let's say that your problem is that you lose pieces of the question. There's some sort of condition or modifier on your quant question. And the reason you miss things is you fail to write them down and you miss them if you don't. Well, you can still use the whiteboard for that. That shouldn't affect you too much. So I would hypothesize that drop-off has more to do with your fundamental relationship with writing things down, why you write things down, what you need out of it, and whether you can transfer that to the whiteboard. That would be my hypothesis on this. But Shovik, what do you think of that?
No, I agree. I think, by the way, if you're in the 600 or 650 level, I think it depends on what your goals are and what kind of schools you are trying to apply to. And look, I mean, I scored a 740, but I was trying to it doesn't matter. Like, first of all, clear doesn't matter for me, right? I don't care about going to business schools. It was an exercise to try to understand, like, how can I get an optimum score in this setting? And I think the bigger question is, if you're testing at a 650 level, for example, are you okay with getting a 650 and, like, give or take some standard deviation? Is 650 going to get you the things you want? Are you applying to schools that are okay with the 650? If they are not okay with the 650, then it doesn't matter. You need to, like, up your game and you need to be able to score better. I think the bigger problem is if you're applying to a school that's perfectly fine with a 650, but it's not fine with a 600. And then the drop-off becomes significant. In that case, no, I don't think the drop-off is that big. I know for some people it has been that big, and for some people it has actually jumped. But I think if you practice enough, and by the way, the GMAT prep is a very good indicator of your test. So if you practice GMAT prep with the whiteboard, that's the score you can expect with like 20 standard deviations point plus or minus. So I wouldn't be too worried.
And we're getting a whole bunch of kind of more granular questions about the whiteboard. One about expressing power.
I'm going to take two of those. So if my camera fails to autofocus, sorry about that. Let's see. I do have a few questions from the forum that I definitely want to address. Okay, Carlo had a horrible experience with tech. I'm sorry. I know a lot of other people did too, but not everyone. So I think they're getting better at this. Also, I'll quickly mention that I had a bad proctor experience as well. So because I wasn't writing things down, I was sort of, thinking out loud. And I was almost like mumbling to myself. And the proctor called me to tell me to stop doing that. I think that was really annoying. I think that was awful. I don't know, maybe they were suspicious that I'm recording questions or something. Like maybe that's a way you can cheat. But it was annoying because I like to think out loud, because when I can't write, I have to have something. Anyway, all right. So let's look at more questions. And Carlo just elaborates on the screen was black for 30 minutes and didn't know what to do. I was afraid they would cancel the exam, tried to fix by shutting the computer or check the phone since they were recording. Okay, I'm sorry, man. I think you qualify for a refund or a retake. Okay, I want to learn how I can express powers and roots in the online book. Good question. For powers, I just use the power sign, which is generally above the 6 key on your keyboard. Generally, that's what I use. Okay, so And Carlo got a Q48 V51.
Yeah,
Carlo, you killed it. That was a great score.
Yeah, I was really impressed that with getting rattled by 30 minutes of dark screen and still getting that score. And Carlo, I don't know what your practice tests were like, but it is really hard to perform that well when you're sitting there for that long. So congratulations.
Could you please take a session on the usage of whiteboard calculation source equations? I mean, we could try, but I'm awful at that. I mean, I can teach you how to do text box, but hey, if you ask GMAT Ninja politely, I've heard he responds. But he's super busy. So I would be on the forum and learn from there. But yeah, if that's a session that everybody wants, we can definitely try that. All right, so let's see.
And we have a question about roots as well, not just powers. I mean, my default on that would be just to write SQ or SQRT.
Yeah. We'll go back to the dark ages.
Welcome back to the 90s.
Okay, I have the test next week. Anyone could have some good sample tests. GMAT Prep, that's the only sample test that matters. And I would safely say that there are no other tests you should care about. I mean, you could, sorry, I need to adjust my chair. You take a few tests to see how realistic you are doing with time and stamina. The only test I would recommend is GMAT Club Quant Test, because I don't know if people know Bunuel. I'd be shocked if they didn't, but he does a very good job in reproducing GMAT-like questions with a fair amount of amped up difficulty levels. So it'll be the same little trickery. Like I hate some of the GMAT quant tricks, like the zero or the positive or the negative. I always fumble on that. And Bunuel is sort of very good at adapting to that. But GMAT Prep, GMAT Exam Pack 1, Exam Pack 2, those are the tests you should care about. Okay, somebody, Yash said
I can talk a little bit more on that. Valerio, I think depending, a lot of people, and this might not be the case for Valerio specifically. Good to see you here, by the way. If you've already used all 6 tests, I think for quant, if you want to do GMAT Club tests, or if you want some variety, you want to use some other companies' quant tests, I think that can be really, really good for you. Is the score going to be perfectly accurate? Not necessarily. It's really, really hard to mimic exactly what the test is doing. But if you want something that's going to test your ability to use the whiteboard, it's going to test your ability to manage your time well, quant tests from a non-official source, GMAT Club, top of the heap, go for it. The only big caution is for verbal, I wouldn't use anything that's non-official. So if it's non-official for quant, take the score with a grain of salt. I think it's still really good practice, especially if the whiteboard is your challenge. If you can rely entirely on the GMAT Prep test, the official MBA.com test, please do it. But if you can't, quant, fine. Use GMAT Club, use Manhattan, use Veritas, use a mixture if you'd like, and I think you're okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I also think for verbal, I think it's a question of, are you trying to use the test as an indicator of your actual performance? Are you trying to predict what you're going to score? Or are you using a test to just get better at taking tests?
Right.
So those two things are different. So if you're doing the test because you just want to get better at timing, and you want to get better with staying awake for 5 hours and being at sort of good mental capacity, I'd be fine with any test. But if you're trying to get a prediction, official test is as good as it can get. Okay, I'm getting a few comments on my video being blurry. Charles, how does my video look?
Yeah, you've been on and off pretty pixelated.
Interesting.
So I don't know. I mean, I suppose you could try turning your camera off and back on and see if that helps. The audio has been fine on my end, and I haven't seen any complaints on the live chat. But
interesting. Okay, so I'm just gonna quickly turn off my camera and come back on. Charles, can I leave a few questions with you?
Of course.
So there is one question around a study plan. Like, how do you plan your study if you're taking the GMAT online, right? I think that's tough. And then there is another question on tech issues, another question on stylus. The quick answer to all of the questions is no. You can mostly use keyboard and a mouse. From what I know, it can be online. It can be a wireless mouse and keyboard as well. And Charles, another question for you is, during practice on the whiteboard, I'm awful. I solve equations. It's impossible to solve quant. What should I do? So if you could just talk about these two questions, I'll be right back.
Yeah, no problem. So again, it depends on kind of your fundamental relationship with writing and what you normally do. What we've seen, I've been a little bit pleasantly surprised. So we did a video a couple of weeks ago where I was pretty pessimistic about the whiteboard. This was before the online GMAT actually started administering exams. And I was really, really pessimistic about it and had a sour look on my face for the entire video. What I've actually seen out of our students is that if you're practicing with the whiteboard and you're really, really good about saying, hey, I'm not just going to scrawl things for the sake of scrawling things. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be really deliberate and thoughtful. Do you need 12 lines of algebra to solve a GMAT question? Never. There should never be that much on your page. If that's what you're doing, you're solving it inefficiently. So if your fundamental orientation towards what you're doing on quant is, I'm going to think through it a little bit first, see if I can find the most efficient path forward, that's going to minimize what you need to do on the whiteboard, and it shouldn't be so bad, ideally. And I know that that's kind of a general answer to your question, and without watching you do a whole lot of problems, I can't say any more than that. But it shouldn't be that bad if you're being really strategic about not writing down too much and if you get used to the format. And seeing a whole bunch more questions here. Drop the verbal section. Okay, so we're getting a ton of questions, and I'm a little bit sad to talk about this with Shovik out of the video because I know he wanted to address this as well. Folks, the test has not changed. Anybody who says otherwise is making things up. It is a standardized exam. This is meant to be comparable to all previous GMATs. The only thing that's different is the delivery mechanism. Does that hurt people's performance? Yeah. The questions themselves, same algorithm, same question design, same everything. Verbal is not getting harder, I guarantee it. Every time there's a change to the exam, there are rumors that verbal is getting harder. I've been seeing this for honestly close to 20 years now. The test got shorter. You can select your section order. The rumors start up, verbal's getting harder. Not true. It's the same. Nothing's changed other than the delivery. Guarantee it. Totally promise that that's the case. Seeing some more questions here about the whiteboard. Again, reminder, GMAT Club. There is a whiteboard on the GMAT Club website. I think BB just posted that in the live chat. You can also go on the MBA.com website. There's a whiteboard there you can practice with. So plenty of options for doing that now. And by the way, it's better than I expected. You can draw squares, you can draw circles, and it's not. You can draw shapes. Yeah, the shape, there's actually functions. Sorry?
How's my video looking?
Much better. You're good.
All right. Perfect. So I'm going to take some more questions. Thanks so much, Charles, for fielding.
No worries.
There is no break, correct? Yeah, there is no break. Sorry about that. There's a break between the quant and verbal and IR. But that's like a...
You mean after the verbal and before the IR?
Yes. After the quant and verbal is done, you have some break before the 30 minutes that are left.
5 minutes.
It's also a break of 5 minutes. I didn't time my break. I didn't care about the IR, but yeah. Okay, so let's see. We're getting wow, there are so many questions. Valerio is very honored to be with you, Charles.
Honored to have you here, Valerio. Timing on verbal, just to address that really, really quickly. That is a really complicated topic. It sounds like it shouldn't be. We could say something really succinct probably about how to manage your time well on quant. Verbal, the tough thing there is if you're having timing problems, that's probably a sign that you're fundamentally not efficient enough in how you answer questions. And I'm not sure how much just practicing under time pressure will help you on verbal in particular, because what we see from people who go, I'm going to go faster, I'm going to go faster, I'm going to go faster, is they misread, they miss a bunch of things they normally would get right.
Yeah.
So we have no magic fixes for timing issues on verbal. Generally, when we see that, it's a problem of fundamental efficiency. And that's a much, much tougher thing to fix, unfortunately. I wish we could give you a quick little trick for timing benchmarks or something. But for verbal in particular, they usually don't have the results you want.
Awesome. That's true. And like on that note, let me just remove the question from the screen so that we can... I have a bone to pick with GMAT experts who make videos and topics on how to do a quant question in under 2 minutes and how to do a verbal question in under a minute. Not a big fan, because Those are average numbers, okay? So you get 62 minutes to do 31 questions in quant. That means for some questions, you'll take longer. And for some questions, you'll take less time. To try to solve every question in under 2 minutes, it's questionable. Because there will be questions that you, believe it or not, the time when I got a 760, there was literally a question that just needed the expansion formula of a plus b whole squared. And I was so panicked because it was in the middle of my set. I was like, oh my God, I am bombing quant because this question, like my 10-year-old nephew can do this question. And I second guessed myself. I checked. I took a full minute to answer that question. You'll have stuff like that, even if you're testing really well. So don't worry. So the practice has this chronology. You first look at accuracy. That's way more important than timing. Once you have got accuracy down, you'll start building muscle memory, and that will automatically help you with timing. So, yeah. All right. Can you? Okay, I'm going to go back to the question that I just saw. Are you allowed to keep your phone near your computer in case you're using your phone hotspot? If you're not allowed to keep your phone near, what happens if Proctor calls? The Proctor will call you from the browser system that you're taking the test on. The Proctor did call me. That happened, but it was not a phone. If you're using your phone as a hotspot, you could technically, but not on your desk. So you need to keep the phone a little bit away from your desk, and that's perfectly fine. So, Charles, feel free to pick any question that you think is cool, and we can. Oh, I got a notification from what I can best imagine is BB on the chat that my video is grainy. Thanks, BB. I think I fixed it, but I'm not.
No, you're still grainy, but I can hear you fine. So,
oh, interesting.
I think we'll keep running with it.
Oh, yeah.
There's a question about the rumors. I don't know if you were listening, Shovik. I addressed the rumors that verbal's getting harder pretty forcefully. It is garbage. I've got somebody asking, saying, I want to believe that the rumors are wrong, but then I can't find a reason not seeing the score immediately when it ends. That's test security, almost certainly. So because fundamentally doing the GMAT in your own home where you set up your own environment, that is an environment that GMAT is not directly controlling. There's a bunch more checks on it. They're using AI tools to study your gaze. They're probably studying patterns in your answer choices. They're making sure that none of the questions have been compromised. So that I'm fairly certain is the reason why they're taking a week. It has nothing to do with difficulty. If it was getting harder or easier, that wouldn't give them a reason to wait a week for the score. So again, the test is not changing. Delivery mechanism's changing. Everything else 100% the same. I guarantee it.
Right. And I will also say, though, it's a standardized test, and it's been around for decades. And for decades, I mean, I remember when I was first taking the test, there was this thing about meaning in sentence correction, and suddenly that became a buzzword for test prep companies, which is fine. Like, I think test prep companies should innovate and try to actually get new products out. But at the same time, I could see questions from like 2010, 2009 that were very meaning heavy. So I think the GMAT verbal difficulty level in general has not changed. Also, like, for them to change the difficulty level of verbal questions, how GMAT, and I was lucky enough to do this session in New York City way back in the day about how GMAT creates new questions. The new questions are tested from the experimental questions that we take. So it's literally impossible for them to give easy questions. It's not a thing. So I wouldn't really worry about it. All right. So Charles, we're sort of nearing the end of the session. So it's 45 minutes in. I'm going to take maybe one or two more questions.
Sounds good.
When probably we can expect GMAT exam to be conducted on their old zillion. I don't understand. I think what you're asking is, when can we expect old school in-person type tests? Nobody knows. I think maybe September when some states open. We'll learn from Georgia, I guess. But
Well, that's the US. So there's test centers still open in some parts of the world, by the way. So
Yeah.
I've had students in Japan and Brazil, and I believe the UAE taking tests lately in test centers. It's completely different locally. Here in the US, all 50 states are doing different things, sometimes even within a state. So the laws around staying at home are different in Denver, Colorado than they are in the rest of the state right now. So total mayhem. Nobody knows. I wish we did, but there's unfortunately no answer at all to that, and it's unfortunate. A related question I'd like to address.
Yeah.
So for students starting with their prep, should they change all tutorial strategies into practicing with whiteboard only now? Because that is a really tough question. As of now, remember, you can only take the online GMAT test once only. So if you are certain that you need to take the online GMAT because of what your deadlines are, then by all means, you should be focusing on doing everything with the online whiteboard. If you're certain that that's it, you're going to be one and done with that. What I think I said in a previous video about the online GMAT is don't overreact to this. You want to keep your study strategy stable. So if you were already prepping, I don't want you to radically overhaul what you're doing and overreact to this, because test centers where you live may well open up in 2 weeks, right? So you don't want to overreact to it. And for most people on most deadlines, you're still going to have the chance to go take this in a test center. So yes, if you're certain you're taking online GMAT, by all means, study with a whiteboard. If you don't absolutely have to, sure, maybe you still take the online one and you spend a few weeks practicing with a whiteboard. But in all likelihood, if you're going to get a shot in the test center, don't completely change what you're doing. And kind of some of the things that Shovik and I have both been saying about, yeah, the online whiteboard is clunky. But look, on quant, I think the best thing that most test takers can do is really think consciously about, how do I minimize what I need to write down? That's what makes you efficient anyway on quant. So does that still give you a disadvantage when you use the whiteboard? Sure, the whiteboard's clunky. But that's actually a skill that is going to help you regardless of whether you're taking it with the online whiteboard or not. If you're being really, really good about saying, wait, I'm going to write down things that I need to write down because I've been strategic about my steps forward.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good balancing act too. Like you can actually try and practice writing less, so that you're writing the essentials. So you're building the practice of writing exactly what you need to write. And you're not like, you're not Dostoevsky on your scratchpad. And that skill will help you when this whole thing blows over. And that skill will continue to reward you for those things. Getting a few questions on any last advice. So I think I'm going to just leave you guys with, I have 3 updates, by the way, that's going to happen. But the other ones are, I think one person, I think BB, gave me this advice before I took my second test. It's super important to take the test one question at a time. You are not, I think I get on this zone in the middle of the test, like, oh, so how am I really doing? Am I doing well? Am I doing poorly? And it's almost like, it's very psychological, and you'll probably go through this too. So it's almost impossible to get rid of the whole thing, but try to minimize that. I think that's minimizing that can be very, very helpful. Charles, do you have some last bit advice?
No, I mean, again, I'm on team. Please don't overreact to all of this. And remember, the online GMAT doesn't count towards your yearly limit of 5 or your lifetime limit of 8. So it's going to cost you $200 and 3 hours of your time. And that is not insignificant. But don't overreact to this. Again, you can only take it once. For most of you, you're going to have the shot to take it in a test center. Don't completely change your prep strategies. Don't change your prep timelines.
Right.
Do the best you can. The underlying skills are still absolutely the same. So please, please, please don't overreact to this online GMAT thing. And if you're in doubt and the $200 and 3 hours of your time isn't such a huge deal to you, yeah, why not go take the online GMAT? Can't hurt you. It's good practice.
Right. Awesome. So with that, we're going to start closing. I have 3 quick announcements. Number 1, like the video. That helps us getting to more people. Subscribe to the channel. That helps you when you know there's a new video out. So do those 2 things now so that I actually know if you're paying attention to my bloody little video. A few other things. I'm going to fix my video issue, of course. And then tomorrow, we are doing a profile evaluations video. I'm going to do that with Sam. So I already have received bunch of profiles, so we are good. Thanks for doing that. On Sunday, we're going to do profile evaluations again because we didn't do it last week, and I got a lot of flack for like not doing it and doing a MBA cost video instead. So, well, thousands of you watched it, so you're welcome. So we're going to do that this weekend. So it's going to be the same time. So tomorrow 9 a.m. Pacific, and on Sunday 9 a.m. Pacific. So stay tuned for that. And the quick announcement: I'm taking the GRE at home. I'm taking the GRE at home on May 9, and I've never prepped for the GRE. I've never taken the GRE. I have no business doing it. So good reasons to take the GRE. So my GRE is on May 9th, and on May 10th, of course, I'm going to do a video on how it went. And also, like, I get scores immediately, apparently. So there is no score reveal video. So anyway, so hopefully this was helpful. I do think the GMAT Online is totally achievable, totally hackable. And then there are ways to do better than you think you can. So join us on GMAT Club forums. Lots of people talking about that. Charles, thank you so much for joining. This was awesome. And yeah, I will see you guys soon. And Charles, I'll probably see you sometime soon as well.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much, Shovik. Congratulations on the great score, and congratulations, proud Ross graduate.
Thank you. Go Blue.